Part 2. The Inner Critic in Different Perspectives. If Part 1 taught you how to understand and befriend your inner critic, Part 2 shows you how to handle it in real life. Because let's be honest, it's one thing to feel calm and in control during a reflective exercise, but it's another thing entirely when the critic shows up during a work presentation, in a mirror on a tough body image day, or in the middle of an argument with a loved one. This part is all about practical application. We're going to tackle the places where the inner critic tends to be the loudest: work, relationships, body image, parenting, and personal goals. Each of these areas has its own unique triggers, and the critic has different scripts for each one. But don't worry, you'll learn how to recognize its sneaky tactics and use your new tools to respond with compassion and strength. By the end of Part 2, you'll have a personalized approach for navigating your most challenging moments with clarity, patience, and grace. No more letting your critic call the shots. It's time for you to lead the way. Let's get to it, one situation at a time. Chapter 12. Inner Critic at Work. Overcoming imposter syndrome and perfectionism. Why the critic shows up at work. Work is one of the inner critic's favorite playgrounds. Why? Because it's where so much of our sense of worth and success gets put on display. The high-pressure environment of deadlines, performance reviews, and the constant need to prove yourself triggers the inner critic to jump into action. It's like it's scanning for threats, convinced that failure, rejection, or judgment are just around the corner. But here's the twist. The inner critic thinks it's helping you. Its goal is to motivate you, but its tactics often do more harm than good. Instead of encouraging you, it uses fear as fuel. Common workplace critics. Let's meet the usual suspects that show up at work. You'll probably recognize a few of these characters. The imposter catchphrase: "You're not good enough to be here." How it shows up: it's the voice that makes you feel like a fraud, even when you're fully qualified. You're waiting for someone to find out you're not as competent as they think you are. The perfectionist catchphrase: it has to be flawless before you submit it. How it shows up: the perfectionist keeps you trapped in "I'll do it later" mode because it's never good enough to finish. Projects drag on, and you're afraid to put your work out there. The doubter catchphrase: "You're going to mess this up." How it shows up: this voice makes you second-guess every decision, no matter how small. It's constantly asking, "Are you sure?" which makes it hard to trust your instincts. Practical techniques to manage work-related criticism. If you've been stuck in the loop of imposter syndrome, perfectionism, or chronic self-doubt at work, don't worry. These tools will help you regain control and quiet the noise. 1. The progress over perfection mindset. The perfectionist critic thrives on the idea that you must be flawless at all times. To shift this, you'll adopt a new mantra: progress over perfection. How it works: before starting a task, remind yourself, done is better than perfect. Set a good enough threshold. Ask, what's the minimum effective version of this task? And aim for that first. Celebrate completion, not perfection. When you finish something, acknowledge the win instead of nitpicking it to death. 2. Self-compassion breaks during work hours. Ever have one of those days when everything feels off and your inner critic won't stop talking? That's when a self-compassion break comes in. It's a moment to pause, breathe, and offer yourself kindness, even during a hectic day. How it works: when you're overwhelmed, stop and place a hand on your chest. Say something kind to yourself, like, "This is tough, but I'm doing the best I can." Take 3 slow, deep breaths and remind yourself, I'm allowed to be human at work, too. This simple practice reduces stress, increases clarity, and reminds you that you're worthy of care even when you're struggling. 3. The 2-minute courage technique. The imposter critic loves to make you overthink. It tells you to prepare more, do more research, or wait until you're ready. But the best way to quiet the imposter is through action. The 2-minute courage technique works like this. How it works: when you're stuck in overthinking, ask yourself, what's the smallest action I can take right now? Do it immediately, within 2 minutes. Example: send the email, ask the question, schedule the meeting. Don't wait for readiness. Action creates readiness, not the other way around. Exercise: turn your inner manager into a supportive coach. Your inner critic might think it's your manager, but it's been using outdated methods, like fear and shame, to motivate you. It's time for a management upgrade. This exercise helps you transform your inner critic from a micromanaging boss into a supportive coach. Step 1. Write a job description for your inner critic. What's its current role? Example. Constantly points out mistakes to avoid failure. What's its current approach? Example. Uses harsh criticism and fear tactics. Step 2. Write a new job description for your inner coach. What's the new role of this inner voice? Example. Encourage growth, celebrate progress, and offer constructive feedback. What's the new approach? Example. Uses calm, clear, and supportive language that motivates instead of shames. Step 3. Reframe key beliefs. Identify a belief the critic keeps pushing. Example. I must be perfect at work. Reframe it into a supportive belief. Example. I'm learning and improving with each task I complete. What's next? Your inner critic at work doesn't have to be your enemy. It can become a coach, a guide, and, believe it or not, a supporter. By shifting from I must be perfect to I'm always learning, you'll be able to work with more ease, confidence, and peace. Start with the 2-minute courage technique and progress over perfection to build momentum. Remember, you're not alone in this. Everyone faces these inner voices at work. The difference is, you're doing something about it. Chapter 13. The Inner Critic in Relationships. Overcoming self-doubt and fear of rejection. How the inner critic affects relationships. If there's one place your inner critic loves to stir up drama, it's in your relationships. Romantic relationships, friendships, even family connections. No space is off limits for self-doubt and fear. The inner critic's goal? To protect you from rejection and pain. But in doing so, it often makes you second-guess yourself, push people away, or cling too tightly out of fear. Here's how it shows up. Self-doubt in romantic relationships. It whispers, you're not lovable, or they're going to leave you. When that voice takes over, you're more likely to look for proof that something is wrong, even when it's not. The fear of being too much or not enough. In friendships, you might overthink texts, wonder if you're annoying someone, or avoid sharing your true feelings because you're afraid it's too much. Conflict escalation. When the critic becomes defensive or self-blaming. When you're in an argument, the inner critic might tell you, it's all your fault. Or it might swing the other way and say, they're the problem, not you. Either way, it's trying to protect you from feeling vulnerable. Common relationship critics. You've met these inner voices before. Here's a closer look at some of the most common relationship critics that love to jump in. The people pleaser catchphrase. You need to be liked. How it shows up. You overcommit, avoid saying no, and pretend to be fine when you're really not. People pleasing is rooted in the fear of rejection. The rejection fear catchphrase. They will leave if you make a mistake. How it shows up. You're constantly scanning for signs of trouble in the relationship. If someone's mood shifts, you're immediately worried it's about you. This makes it hard to relax and trust the connection. The blame shifter catchphrase. It's all your fault. How it shows up. This voice thrives during arguments. It'll either tell you that you're the one to blame for everything or that they're to blame, and you'll fight to prove it. Either way, it's trying to win the argument so you don't have to feel wrong or vulnerable. Practical techniques to navigate relationship criticism. These techniques will help you navigate the voice of the inner critic in your relationships. They're simple, but they require practice. The more you use them, the quieter that critical voice becomes. 1. The compassionate partner exercise. When your partner, friend, or family member gives you feedback, like, you've been really distant lately, the inner critic might hear, you're a bad person. But what if you could hear that feedback with compassion instead? How it works. When you're feeling defensive, pause and breathe. Ask yourself, if my partner is on my side, how might I hear this feedback differently? Reframe the feedback as if it's coming from a compassionate place. They're saying this because they want to feel closer to me, not to attack me. 2. Role reversal visualization. If a friend told you they felt not enough in their relationships, what would you say to them? Would you criticize them or tell them they're worthy of love? Spoiler alert, you'd show compassion. So let's flip that script and treat yourself like you treat a friend. How it works. Think of a recent moment when your inner critic was loud in a relationship. Imagine a close friend is feeling the exact same way you did. What would you tell them? Write it down, and then say those exact words to yourself. 3. Mindful communication practices. Your inner critic's voice can sneak into conversations, especially during conflict. It'll tell you to defend yourself or don't admit you're wrong. But mindful communication is about listening, pausing, and responding with care instead of reacting from fear. How it works: pause before responding. Take one deep breath before you reply in a conversation, especially during an argument. Use I statements instead of "you never listen to me." Try "I feel unheard right now." Check for assumptions. Before reacting, ask yourself, am I assuming they're upset with me, or do I actually know it's true? Exercise. Reframe your inner critic's relationship rules. Every inner critic comes with a list of rules you're supposed to follow in relationships. Some of them might sound like, never show weakness. Don't ask for too much. It's needy. If they're upset, it's probably your fault. These rules were picked up from childhood, past relationships, and cultural conditioning. But guess what? You're allowed to rewrite them. Here's how to do it. Write down 3 relationship rules your inner critic has been enforcing. Ask, is this rule helping me, or is it hurting me? Reframe each one into an empowering belief. For example, old rule, never show weakness. New belief, vulnerability creates deeper connections. What's next? Your inner critic's voice in relationships is always trying to protect you from pain. But when you're driven by fear of rejection, people-pleasing, or blame, relationships feel more stressful than supportive. Now you've got tools. You can pause during arguments, offer yourself the same kindness you'd offer a friend, and challenge those rules that don't serve you anymore. As you practice, remember this: you're worthy of love, just as you are. You don't have to prove it, earn it, or perform for it. Relationships aren't a test. They're a place to grow, learn, and be fully human, flaws and all. You're doing the work. Keep going. Chapter 14. The Inner Critic and Anxiety. How to break the anxiety critic cycle. Why the inner critic feeds anxiety. Anxiety and the inner critic are like two best friends who bring out the worst in each other. You're probably familiar with the way they tag team your mind. It starts with a small worry. What if I mess this up? And before you know it, your inner critic chimes in with, yeah, and if you mess it up, everyone's going to think you're a failure. Here's the deal. Negative self-talk fuels catastrophic thinking. It's like throwing gasoline on a small spark of fear. Instead of simply worrying, I might miss the deadline, it becomes, I'll miss the deadline, lose my job, and never recover from this failure. See the difference? The critic's role in all this is to protect you by preparing you for the worst. But instead of helping you stay safe, it's activating your anxiety. And the more anxious you feel, the louder the critic gets. It's a vicious cycle, but it's one you can break. The anxiety critic loop. Here's how the loop works. Anxiety kicks in. You feel uncertainty or fear about the future. The critic responds. It jumps in with helpful thoughts like, you should have seen this coming, or if you'd just been more prepared, you wouldn't be in this mess. Anxiety gets worse. The critic's words create more fear and shame, leading to even more anxious thoughts. The cycle repeats. The heightened anxiety makes the critic's voice even louder. Practical techniques to end the critic anxiety loop. The good news: you don't have to stay stuck in the anxiety critic loop. Here are a few techniques to break the cycle and create more calm in your mind. 1. The stop, breathe, question, reframe process. When you're caught in anxious thoughts and critical self-talk, you're in fight or flight mode. This process helps you slow down, calm your nervous system, and challenge the thoughts. How it works: stop, pause the mental spiral. You might say to yourself, okay, I'm spiraling. Let's pause. Breathe. Take 3 slow, deep breaths. This simple act tells your body, we're safe. Question. Ask, is this thought 100% true? What's the evidence for and against it? Example. If the thought is, I'm going to fail this project, you'd ask, how do I know that? What evidence do I have that I'll succeed instead? Reframe. Turn the critical thought into a supportive one. Instead of, I'm going to fail, You might say, "This is challenging, but I've overcome hard things before." 2. The inner safe space visualization. Sometimes you need a break from the critic's voice. This visualization helps you create a mental space where the critic can't follow you. It's like building a sanctuary in your mind where calm and safety exist. How it works. Close your eyes and imagine a space where you feel safe and protected. It could be a cozy cabin, a sunlit garden, or a quiet beach. Picture this space in detail. What do you see? What's the temperature like? Is there a chair or a bed where you can rest? Imagine your inner critic outside this space. You're safe inside. If the critic's voice gets loud, imagine closing the door and saying, "Not right now. I'm resting." This isn't woo-woo, it's a nervous system hack. When your brain imagines a calm, safe environment, it signals your body to relax. 3. The worst-case scenario. Exposure exercise. Catastrophic thinking thrives on the fear of the unknown. Your inner critic says, if you fail, it'll be the worst and you'll never recover. But what if you stopped running from that worst-case scenario and faced it head-on? How it works. Write down the worst-case scenario your critic is warning you about. Ask, if this did happen, how would I handle it? Write down every step you take. Ask, has something like this happened before? How did I get through it? Realize that even in a worst-case scenario, you'd figure it out. This exercise takes the fear out of the unknown. Exercise. Break the loop. To break the anxiety critic loop, you need to see it in action. This exercise will help you spot how the two interact and rewrite the script. Step 1. Identify 3 moments where anxiety and the inner critic interacted. Write down 3 situations where you felt anxious and heard your inner critic's voice. Example, before presenting at work, I felt anxious and heard the thought, "You're going to mess this up." Step 2. Write a conversation script for each moment. Write out the dialogue as if your critic and your anxious self are having a conversation. Then, bring in your calm, higher self to intervene. Example, critic, "You're going to mess this up." Anxious self, "Yeah, I'm so nervous. What if I forget everything?" Higher self, "Even if you forget something, you're resourceful. You'll figure it out as you go." Step 3. Practice this new conversation in real time. The next time anxiety kicks in, pause and ask, "What would my higher self say right now?" Then, say it out loud. What's next? Breaking the anxiety critic cycle isn't a one-time event. It's a practice. Every time you pause, breathe, and reframe a thought, you're teaching your brain a new way to respond. Start small. Try the stop, breathe, question, reframe process today. Create your inner safe space tonight. Write down 1 worst-case scenario tomorrow and see how you'd handle it. You're not stuck with anxiety or self-criticism. You're learning how to talk back to it, how to challenge it, and how to step into your calm, wise self. The loop doesn't own you anymore. You're in charge now. Chapter 15. The Inner Critic and Body Image. Quieting self-judgment about appearance. How the inner critic shapes our body image. Let's be honest. If there's one area where the inner critic has way too much to say, it's our body image. Every glance in the mirror can feel like an evaluation, like there's a judge handing out scores from 1 to 10. Sound familiar? This isn't all in your head. Social comparisons, media pressure, and years of internalized body rules have trained the critic to act like a relentless commentator. The media shows us perfect images and says, "This is how you should look." Our inner critic echoes it, saying, "You're not there yet." The critic's goal is not to ruin your self-esteem. It's trying, in its twisted way, to motivate you to fit in or be accepted. But we know how that story goes. No amount of criticism ever leads to real self-love. The critic is the image judge. This version of your inner critic has one job: to evaluate your appearance. It's scanning every reflection, every photo, and every glance from a stranger. The image judge is ruthless, and it's always measuring you against impossible standards. If you've ever looked in the mirror and thought, why do I look like this?" You've met the image judge. But here's the twist. You can turn this critic into a compassionate ally. Common body image critics. Here are the roles your inner critic might be playing when it comes to body image. The mirror judge catchphrase: You look fat today. How it shows up. You're getting ready, and as soon as you see your reflection, bam, harsh critique. It's not subtle. It's blunt, mean, and relentless. The fitness perfectionist catchphrase. You should be thinner, stronger, more fit. How it shows up. It's not just about fitness goals. It's about never being enough. You've worked out, but the critic says, not enough reps, not enough progress, not enough results. The social approval seeker catchphrase. They are all judging your appearance. How it shows up. It's that anxious feeling at social events when you're convinced everyone's noticing your flaws. Every glance feels like it's loaded with judgment, even though it's not. Techniques for body kindness and self-acceptance. If you're ready to turn down the volume on your image judge, here's how to start. These techniques are simple, but they're powerful. 1. The kind mirror exercise. The next time you're in front of a mirror, try this. Yes, it'll feel awkward at first, but stick with it. How it works. Stand in front of a mirror. Instead of scanning for flaws, find one thing you appreciate about your body. It could be your strong legs, your eyes, your smile, anything. Say it out loud. I appreciate my body part because reason. Each day, add a new appreciation. It's okay if it's small. The goal is to change what your mind looks for in the mirror. Why it works. When you actively look for the good, you're training your brain to spot positive things instead of flaws. It's like flipping a switch in how you see yourself. 2. Daily affirmations for body neutrality. Body neutrality is about seeing your body as a partner, not a project. Instead of obsessing over how it looks, you're focusing on what it does for you. This shift is huge. How it works. Write down 3 daily affirmations. Examples. My body carries me through life, and I'm grateful for that. My legs allow me to walk, run, and explore the world. My body's worth is not defined by its appearance. Say them every morning or anytime you're feeling self-critical. Why it works. You're retraining your mind to focus on function over form. Your body is so much more than a decoration. It's your home, your vehicle, and your constant companion. 3. Media detox strategy. If you're constantly bombarded by perfect images online, it's going to be tough to feel good about your body. The perfect body doesn't exist, but social media filters make it look like it does. How it works. Unfollow any account that makes you feel less than. Follow people with body positive, body neutral, or realistic content. Set screen-free times in your day to avoid mindless scrolling. Why it works. If your social media feed is filled with perfect bodies, you'll believe that's normal. But if your feed is filled with real bodies, you'll start seeing yourself with more compassion. Exercise. Rewrite your body rules. Your inner critic has probably created rules about how your body should look. These rules aren't facts. They're just beliefs you've picked up along the way. Time to rewrite them. Step 1. Identify 3 body-related rules imposed by your inner critic. Example. I must weigh X pounds. Example. I should never have cellulite. Example. I'm only attractive if I'm toned and fit. Step 2. Rewrite each one as a body-neutral belief. New belief. I'm grateful for how my body allows me to move through life. New belief. Bodies change over time, and that's normal. New belief. My body's worth is not defined by its appearance. Step 3. Write these beliefs where you'll see them daily. Post them on your mirror, phone wallpaper, or journal. What's next? Your body is not a project. It's a home, a partner, and a miracle in motion. The image judge may always have opinions, but you're in charge of how much space it gets to take up. Start with one practice. Maybe it's the kind mirror exercise or one of the body-neutral affirmations. The goal isn't to love your body 24/7. It's to feel more at peace with it. You're already doing amazing work. You're learning to treat yourself with the kindness you've always deserved. Keep going. Chapter 16. The Inner Critic and Procrastination. Stop self-sabotage. How the inner critic creates procrastination. If you've ever found yourself scrolling social media or cleaning your kitchen instead of starting that important project, guess what? Your inner critic is probably behind it. Procrastination isn't just about being lazy. It's often a defense mechanism triggered by the inner critic's need to protect you from failure, discomfort, or uncertainty. The inner critic has a few sneaky tactics to keep you stuck. The perfectionism trap. If it's not perfect, don't even start. This one's classic. The inner critic believes that perfection will protect you from criticism, but all it really does is make you avoid starting in the first place. The avoidance critic. If you avoid it, you can't fail. This voice tries to protect you from failure by making you avoid the task altogether. The logic is, if I don't try, I can't mess up. But here's the truth. Perfectionism and avoidance are two sides of the same coin. They both keep you stuck. The way to break free? Recognize these voices for what they are and learn how to respond to them. Common critics linked to procrastination. Here's a closer look at the characters behind your procrastination. The avoider catchphrase. This is too hard. You'll fail anyway. How it shows up. You've got a big, overwhelming project to tackle, and the avoider's first move is to convince you to do literally anything else. Suddenly, organizing your sock drawer feels urgent. The perfectionist catchphrase. If it's not perfect, don't even start. How it shows up. You have an idea for a new project, but before you've even begun, your mind is telling you, it's not going to be good enough. So what's the point? You're paralyzed before you've even taken the first step. The overthinker catchphrase. You need more research before you start. How it shows up. You're about to start something new, and suddenly you're on your 17th Google search for best way to get started. The overthinker keeps you in research mode forever, never letting you actually start. Techniques to overcome procrastination. Ready to outsmart these critics? Here are some tools you can use to stop procrastination in its tracks. 1. The 2-minute rule. This rule is so simple, but it's a game changer. The idea? If a task will take 2 minutes or less, do it now. If a bigger task feels overwhelming, break it into a step that takes 2 minutes or less. How it works? Choose a small, simple action you can complete in 2 minutes. If you're procrastinating on writing a report, set a timer for 2 minutes and just write the first sentence. Often, the hardest part is starting. Once you've begun, momentum kicks in, and you're more likely to keep going. Why it works? It's easier to convince your mind to do 2 minutes than to finish the whole project. It's like tricking your inner critic into letting you start. 2. The just do it anyway reframe. Sometimes we wait to feel ready before we start a task. Spoiler alert, you'll never feel ready. The inner critic's favorite lie is, you're not ready yet, so wait until you are. But waiting to feel ready is just a sneaky form of procrastination. How it works? When you're waiting to feel motivated or feel ready, remind yourself that action creates motivation, not the other way around. Tell yourself, I'm going to start even if I'm not ready. This works because once you're in motion, momentum builds naturally. Why it works? Waiting for readiness is just another delay tactic from your critic. By taking action before you feel ready, you're proving to yourself that readiness isn't a requirement. 3. Self-compassion for productivity. If your self-talk is filled with, I have to, and I should, then you're putting a ton of pressure on yourself. No wonder you're procrastinating. Pressure creates resistance. Self-compassion, on the other hand, opens the door for ease in action. How it works? Replace I have to with I choose to. Example, instead of I have to finish this report, say, I'm choosing to work on this report because it's part of my bigger goal. Offer yourself kindness in moments of struggle. If you're stuck in a procrastination loop, pause and say, it's okay. I'm doing the best I can right now. Why it works? Self-compassion reduces the stress response, while should thinking triggers it. When you're kind to yourself, you're more likely to take action, not less. Exercise. Turn your procrastination critic into a productivity coach. Your procrastination critic is trying to protect you from failure, embarrassment, or discomfort. But it's doing it in a way that's keeping you stuck. It's time to give this critic a new role. Instead of being your critic, it's going to be your productivity coach. Step 1. Identify 3 procrastination-related thoughts your critic repeats. Example, this is too hard. Example, you're going to fail, so don't bother starting. Example, you're not ready yet. Do more research first. Step 2. Reframe these thoughts as action-oriented instructions. This is too hard becomes, what's one small part one can tackle right now? You're going to fail becomes take the first small step and see what happens. You're not ready yet becomes start before you're ready. It's how you get ready. Step 3, write your new coach-style instructions somewhere you'll see them. Post them on your desk, journal, or notes app. Every time you're tempted to procrastinate, read them out loud. What's next? Procrastination isn't about laziness. It's about fear, perfectionism, and avoidance, all of which are driven by the inner critic. But now, you've got tools to handle it. Start small. Use the 2-minute rule today. Reframe one procrastination thought into an action-oriented instruction. Progress, not perfection. You're not behind. You're exactly where you need to be. And you're already taking action by reading this chapter. Chapter 17. The inner critic as a parent. From not good enough to good enough. Why parents experience a strong inner critic. Parenting is already tough. And then there's the inner critic making it 10 times harder. This voice loves to show up when you're tired, stressed, or second-guessing yourself. It's like having an invisible, perfect parent judge in your head, constantly grading your performance. Where does this come from? Parental pressures are everywhere. Society has this idealized version of the perfect parent, always patient, always present, never overwhelmed. Add in family expectations, unsolicited advice from strangers, and the endless comparison trap of social media, and it's no wonder your inner critic is working overtime. The inner critic's goal isn't to ruin your day, though it might feel that way. It's trying to motivate you to be the best parent possible. But since perfect parent doesn't exist, all it's really doing is making you feel like you're falling short. Common parental critics, these voices, might sound familiar. Here's a look at some of the most common versions of the parental critic. The perfect parent critic catchphrase, you should be doing more for your kids. How it shows up. It's the voice that makes you feel like you're never doing enough. If you're at work, it tells you to be home. If you're at home, it tells you to be more productive. No matter what you're doing, it's not enough. The comparison parent critic catchphrase, other parents are doing better than you. How it shows up. You're scrolling on social media and see another parent's perfectly staged family adventure post. Suddenly, you're convinced you're not doing enough fun stuff with your kids. The comparison parent critic thrives on social media comparisons. The guilt tripper critic catchphrase, if you don't do X, you're a bad parent. How it shows up. The guilt tripper loves to latch onto specific moments, like missing a school event or letting your kid have extra screen time. It's constantly telling you that you're not doing the right thing, even though right keeps changing. Techniques to quiet the parental critic. The good news, you're not stuck with these critics forever. Here are a few techniques to turn down the volume on that not good enough voice and step into the role of a good enough parent. 1. The good enough parent. Reframe. Here's a truth bomb. Good enough is actually good enough. The goal isn't perfection, it's presence. The good enough parent shows up, tries their best, and accepts that mistakes are part of the process. How it works. Redefine success as a parent. Success isn't getting it all right. It's showing up with love and effort. When you're feeling not good enough, ask, would I expect perfection from another parent I love and respect? Probably not. So why expect it from yourself? Adopt this mantra. My love is enough. My effort is enough. I am enough. 2. Compassion for the parent self. You're probably great at comforting your kids when they're upset, right? But how do you treat yourself when you're overwhelmed? Self-compassion is about offering yourself the same kindness you'd offer your child. How it works. When you're feeling guilty or not enough, place your hand on your chest and say, this is tough right now. I'm doing the best I can. Write down the words you'd say to your child if they came to you feeling not good enough. Now, say those words to yourself. Practice mental hugs. Visualize yourself being held with love and compassion, just like you'd comfort a child. 3. Releasing the myth of the perfect parent. Newsflash. The perfect parent does not exist. You're not supposed to have it all together, and you're definitely not supposed to do it all. The perfect parent is a myth created by movies, social media, and outdated cultural expectations. It's time to let it go. How it works. Make a list of perfect parent qualities you've been chasing, like never yells or Always patient. Cross out each one and write, I release this expectation. Replace, I'm failing, with, I'm learning. Practice this mantra. Messy, loving parenting is still good parenting. Exercise. Write a self-compassion letter from your future self. As a parent, this exercise will shift your perspective in a big way. Imagine your future self, 10, 20, or 30 years from now, looking back at this exact season of your parenting life. Here's how to do it. Imagine future you. Picture your older, wiser self reflecting on your life right now. What would they say to you? Write a letter to your current self from future you. Write words of encouragement and validation. Example, I know you're worried about doing everything perfectly, but trust me, you're doing great. Your kids won't remember the tiny mistakes. They'll remember how loved they felt. Read it back to yourself whenever the parental critic shows up. What's next? If the inner critic has been running the not good enough show in your parenting life, it's time to change that story. You're already a good enough parent, not because you're perfect, but because you show up with love and effort every single day. Start with one practice. Maybe it's self-compassion during tough moments, or maybe it's rewriting the perfect parent myth. Little by little, you'll quiet the parental critic's voice and replace it with a kinder, more loving one. You're doing better than you think. Keep going. Chapter 18. The Inner Critic and Health Goals. Overcoming self-sabotage, how the inner critic blocks weight loss, fitness, and health goals. Ever set a health goal, like losing weight, eating better, or sticking to a fitness plan, only to find yourself self-sabotaging? It's not a willpower problem. It's the inner critic. Here's how it works. The critic's main strategy is to convince you that you're not worthy of success. It's sneaky, though. It doesn't come right out and say that. Instead, it'll attack when progress feels slow or when you're not perfect. It'll tell you, see, you're not disciplined enough to do this, or you've already missed a day, so you might as well give up. But here's the truth. Progress isn't about perfection. It's about consistency. And consistency doesn't require you to be perfect every day. It requires you to keep going even after you're not perfect. Common health critics. Here's a look at the inner critic's health-focused personas. See if you recognize any of these voices. The fitness perfectionist critic catchphrase, you skipped a workout. You're lazy. How it shows up, you've been hitting your workouts all week, but then you miss one. Instead of focusing on your progress, the critic calls you lazy and inconsistent. It convinces you that missing one day has ruined all your progress. Spoiler alert, it hasn't. The all or nothing critic catchphrase, one bad meal ruined everything. How it shows up, you've been eating balanced meals, but then you have a pizza night. Suddenly, the critic jumps in with, well, you've already ruined it, so you might as well give up and start over on Monday. Sound familiar? This all or nothing thinking is one of the most common traps. Techniques to stay on track. The good news is you can quiet the health critic and keep moving forward. Here's how. 1. The micro goal method. Big health goals, like lose 20 pounds or run a marathon, can feel overwhelming. When the critic sees how far away you are from the goal, it'll try to convince you to quit. The micro goal method flips this on its head. How it works, instead of focusing on the big goal, set micro goals that you can complete daily. Example, instead of run a marathon, your micro goal is walk for 10 minutes today. When you complete a micro goal, celebrate it. Small wins add up fast. Why it works? Your brain loves wins, even small ones. Every time you complete a micro goal, you're proving to yourself, I'm doing it. I'm making progress. This builds momentum. 2. Compassion for setbacks. If you're human, and I'm guessing you are, you're going to experience setbacks. The all or nothing critic will try to convince you that a setback is a failure. But it's not. It's just part of the process. How it works. When you experience a setback, pause and breathe. Reframe the setback as a learning experience instead of a failure. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this? Remind yourself, progress is not about perfection. It's about showing up after a setback. Why it works. Compassion reduces the shame spiral. When you're kind to yourself after a setback, you're more likely to get back on track. 3. The daily reset ritual. You've probably had this thought before. I'll start fresh on Monday. But waiting for Monday just delays your progress. The daily reset ritual allows you to start fresh every single day. How it works. Every morning, set the intention to reset your health goals for the day. No matter what happened yesterday, today is a fresh start. Use this affirmation. Today is a new day, and I'm allowed to start fresh. Why it works. The idea that yesterday's mistakes mean today's failure is one of the critic's favorite lies. The daily reset ritual reminds you that every day is a fresh chance to try again. Exercise. Write a kindness contract for your health journey. Your inner critic's rules for health goals are usually harsh and impossible to meet. It's time to create a new set of rules based on kindness. Here's how to do it. Write down 3 self-kindness commitments you'll follow on your health journey. Here are some examples. I will speak to myself with compassion after a setback. I will celebrate every small win, no matter how small. I will remind myself that I am worthy of health and happiness right now, not when I lose 10 pounds. Step 3. Post your contract where you'll see it. Put it on your fridge, your mirror, or as a reminder on your phone. Every time your critic shows up, read your contract. What's next? Your health journey is not a straight line. It's full of twists, turns, and messy middle moments. But here's the truth. You're already doing better than you think. Every small win counts. Every setback is a lesson. And every day is a chance to reset and try again. Start with one thing. Use the 2-minute rule to break down your health goal into micro goals. Or try the daily reset ritual tomorrow morning. Progress, not perfection, is how real change happens. You're doing amazing work. Keep going.